Very rarely does an idea, something that's truly world-changing, come into being fully formed. It has to go through iteration and innovation as you refine the original concept. Usually a lack of knowledge or technology is what's holding back the initial idea from becoming what it's eventually aiming to be, and by looking back through each iteration along the way, we can track the arc of innovation. This is usually done much later on when the idea has become fully developed, and it's the work of documentary filmmakers to lay these out and present them in an engaging way. When making a documentary, the filmmaker will often emulate the information delivery method of other audiovisual media, and will try to narrativize the key events in the development of whatever their subject is, in order to sell it to you as a story for the purposes of entertainment. So if film documentaries are constrained by the format of being a purely non-interactive audiovisual piece of media, what could a video game documentary look like? And I don't mean a documentary about video games, but one that is a video game. Hello and welcome back to the Steam Pilgrimage, your one-stop shop for news about games that came out fucking years ago. And today we're talking about an ingenious little game that I think could almost be classified as a documentary on the evolution of gaming, Evoland. The premise of Evoland is purposely quite simple. There is an evil entity threatening Evolandia, and it's your job to stop it. That's the entire premise, and from what you're seeing on screen, this probably looks oddly familiar, especially if you've played a certain game franchise from the PS1 era. But the game doesn't start like this. The game starts like this. You're dropped into this world and you're told that you've got the right key. So, Mega Man X tutorial style, thank you Egoraptor, you go the only way that you can until you hit the chest, and then you get the left key. So you move left, and then multi-directional movement along the X and Y axis becomes available. By this point, the brighter among you are probably starting to figure out what's going on here. The goal of Evolandia is to progress through the world, finding these chests, and each time you do, the game itself advances, following the evolution of gaming conventions. You'll go from a 2D adventure-style game in the vein of old-school Legend of Zelda, and along the way you'll progress into a 2D turn-based battle system of early Final Fantasy games, move on to a fully 3D hack-and-slash game, and there's even a small action RPG section towards the end, a la Diablo. This game proudly wears its influences right on its sleeve because it's not trying to be original or groundbreaking, even though it manages to be both. Evoland is a love letter to RPGs and to game development in general, purposely emulating and copying the style of games from a variety of RPG subgenres, and in doing so it becomes this amazing interactive documentary on the progression of video games over a span of maybe 2 decades. If this has enticed you so far, then I'm gonna do something a little bit counterintuitive here and tell you to stop watching this video and go play the game right now. It is dirt cheap, and it's not only worth your money, but your time. For any of you sticklers out there who need a little bit more convincing though, stay tuned and join me as we explore the ever-developing world of Evoland. But before we begin, I want to first say a big thank you to all the new people who have subscribed. For those who are unaware, this video is part of a long-term project called the Steam Pilgrimage. The idea is to stop buying games and getting sucked in by key reselling websites and online sales, and finally play and finish every game in my Steam backlog, and of course then make videos and chat with you guys about it. If this is something that you want to tag along for, then maybe consider subscribing. And if you don't want that kind of commitment, but you like the video, a thumbs up or a share is always appreciated. You can also join the Discord server or use the hashtag SteamPilgrimage on social media to share your experiences and start hacking away at that backlog. The level of care and attention put into this game is honestly quite astounding. As you move through the world of Evoland and collect the various chests along the way, the entire presentation of the game changes around you. Starting with the greyish green tint of an old school NES game, You soon unlock a simple 16 color palette, and then things get a bit more advanced with a 256 color palette, then 3D static backgrounds, 3D rendered environments, and eventually all the way up to HD textures. This constant evolution means that several parts of the game had to be made in both 2 and 3D, and the change between them is almost instantaneous. There have been a couple of AAA games that have pulled off this instant graphical switch, like when the Halo Anniversary Editions came out and you could switch between the old graphics and the updated HD ones at the touch of a button. But for such a small studio to pull it off so well is pretty impressive. Well, at least from this layman's perspective. And the visuals are not the only thing that upgrade as you progress. The game starts with absolutely no sound whatsoever until you unlock basic sound effects. Then you go on to chiptune music, and man, when I finally got that 16-bit music upgrade, I realized how far audio and gaming has come since the days when your sound card dictated the quality of all the beeps and boops you were hearing. The real gem of the presentation though comes from how self-aware the game is of its purpose as more of an homage than a full game release. Every time you open a new chest, you're presented with a little self-referential remark about whatever feature you've just unlocked. So true. If, like me, you're an OG gaming gigachad, then you'll definitely get a chuckle out of some of the gags and references to other games, like the Final Fantasy style battle system that even includes identical text boxes. You even get an airship at the end of the game that allows you to travel anywhere on the world map you've previously been, and the airship captain's name is Sid. Why are they always called Sid? Despite this, however, do not fear if you're not familiar with the games and mechanics that are being referenced here. Just take note and use them to earn yourself some gaming clout or something, I don't know. In terms of the plot or the story, the game keeps things intentionally sparse and cliche. There's a parody of Aerith's death from Final Fantasy VII, the main bad guy is literally just referred to as the Great Evil, and he explains his very simple backstory during the last battle. It's really not supposed to be anything other than a low-resolution, almost parody of RPG tropes. But if this is something that you feel you would miss, maybe consider playing the second game, Evoland 2. I've heard that they take all of the mechanics from this game, but they flesh each one of them out and turn it into an actual RPG with its own systems that weave the mechanics of changing art and playstyle constantly into the story. But for this game, that really wasn't needed. I totally enjoyed the on-the-nose references to some of my favorite games and the campy, sort of underdeveloped nature of the entire experience. I've lived through most of the advances that the game shows throughout its very concise 2-hour playtime, and seeing the jump between each innovation in a matter of minutes rather than years really put it all into perspective. I recommend this game purely for the clever way that it's presented, but of course we have to talk about the gameplay. Just like with the visuals, the gameplay also changes as you gather all of these reality warping chests that you find. However, unlike the visuals, these different gameplay elements aren't entirely discarded once you unlock the next one. The game will have you jumping back and forth between combat and exploration methods periodically, starting with the humble dual-axis hack and slash. There isn't much you can do at the start of the game other than poke stuff with your sword, but you will eventually move on to 3D, where this becomes more of a swing. You don't even start with a health bar of any kind, you die in one hit, until you find the upgrade that gives you hearts that protect your life. There's a bunch of Gen Zers right now recoiling in horror, wondering how we ever managed to live under these conditions. Once you unlock the overworld map, the combat shifts to a turn-based RPG. This, I think, is the only area of the game that I really had a problem with. Now, the distance between areas you have to cover isn't too far, so the amount of random encounters you'll be running into isn't overwhelming. But my god, is the fighting system bare bones. You have the ability to attack, and your companion that you pick up can heal, and she eventually does get her own attack, and that's pretty much it. You do get a special move right at the end of the game that has a 300-second cooldown, but other than that, it's very lackluster. The fights themselves are incredibly easy, so even just giving me a single flashier move that I could break out just to mix it up a little bit would have been greatly appreciated. And the last section that you'll encounter is a Diablo-style action RPG, complete with loot and a ridiculous number of slots that you can fill with gear. I have no idea if any of this stuff is actually doing what it says it is, but I appreciated this section being in the game. They even replace your health icons for this section with the unmistakable pool of blood or potion or something. I've never been quite sure what this is supposed to be. So the 3 parts of the combat are all fine and dandy, but the game also pulls off some interesting tricks using the unique progression mechanic. For example, at the start of the game, you're constrained by a set movement distance. That means that when you push the button, your character moves a set distance in that direction. Eventually though, you come across this gap, which is sort of like an in-betweeny space that you can't quite get to. And once you unlock and read the sign nearby, it informs you that only nimble adventurers can pass. Eventually, you get unrestricted movement and can come back and make your way through this off-kilter obstacle. The same thing occurs with this rock. In 2D, it blocks your path and looks very, very imposing, but once the game shifts to 3D, you can come back to find that from this perspective, the rock is only about knee height and it's easily surmountable. And both of these are great uses of the incredibly unique mechanic of upgrading the world, but the real coup de grace comes later on once you get access to time travel. About 3/4 of the way through the game, you come across these crystals which, when hit, transport you backwards or forwards in time. But the past of this world is the top-down 2D world that you left behind, 45 minutes ago. Every time you hit the crystal, the scene transitions instantly between 2 and 3 dimensions, almost seamlessly. You have to switch between the different perspectives, thinking, how do I end up in that place over there in the right perspective to hit the next target? This was an amazing way of creating a puzzle in a game like this, and I was really disappointed to find out that it was the only section that actually employed this mechanic. I've been told it features far more heavily in the sequel, but even as a proof of concept in this game, it was really innovative and interesting. I feel like it was introduced late enough into the game that it could have continued to the end, but I'll get over it considering how small the team working on the game was for how many different features it has in it. The devs even designed a card game like the ones found in Final Fantasy 8 and 9. There's 25 cards to collect throughout the game, and it's actually kind of fun. Is it some elaborate hardcore strategy game in the vein of Gwent from the Witcher series? No, but they still managed to include it in the final product simply as a throwback to when these sort of meta mini-games were popular in JRPGs. Actually, maybe I'm wrong there. Were they ever popular? I don't remember ever enjoying them. The gameplay in Evoland can be summarized as varied but shallow, but do not take that as being a criticism. The point of the game is to get a very brief taste of a wide variety of playstyles and cycle through them in quick succession. The game never really has you doing the same thing for too long, sometimes throwing in a new mechanic like the ARPG section seemingly just for the crack or to flex their creative muscles. If you're coming into this thinking that it will be a complex or even deeper than surface level experience, then you may be frustrated at how the game handles. But that's also missing the forest for the trees. You're not going to have a hard time playing the game, but if you think all the other parts of the game are appealing, the basic gameplay hopefully won't hinder your experience, and then you can move on to the sequel, which is a lot more mechanically complex. But until then, just sit back and enjoy this fun, goofy meta ride. When I first played Evolandia, I was absolutely engrossed by it. I sat down with very few expectations and I ended up playing through it in one sitting, which I did again for this review. The idea for the game is so ingenious, and yet I'm surprised that no one has ever thought of it before. The only other game that I can think of that has a similar sort of idea is DLC Quest, but Evolandia has far more charm than that game. Did I mention this game started life as a game jam project? That's right, this studio is so goddamn ambitious that they planned on making this game in less than a week. Thankfully, they decided to continue work on it and release it in the state that it is now. If you're starting to get sick of me singing the praises of this game, then just know that it gets my seal of approval. You can usually get it on sale for half price, but websites like Kinguin are practically giving this thing away for less than £2. By the way, I know I talk about Kinguin a lot in these videos. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just really like them and I use them a lot. Once you have the game, turn off your phone or put it on flight mode or whatever, get some snacks and just sit down and enjoy. The game is about 2 hours for the main campaign, and if you really want, there's a few collectibles to get that could bring the experience up to 3. And it's perfect if you have nothing to do on a Sunday afternoon, or like midday on a Wednesday or something. Everybody's schedules are all fucked up now. I think the comparison to a documentary is fairly apt here. It doesn't go into detail about the people or the hardware innovations, it focuses on the playing experience and how it's changed over time. Maybe it worked for me because I knew about all the things they were referencing, but I still think someone with just a faint passing interest in games could learn a lot from Evoland, especially young gamers. And considering people born in 2000 are of the legal drinking age in America now, having something like this can be a great way for them to experience a condensed version of the games of the pioneering generations. And with that realization, please excuse me as I go and contemplate my own mortality. If you liked the video, maybe consider leaving a thumbs up, and for more content on whatever game I feel like covering next, you can subscribe down below and turn the bell on to be notified straight away when it comes out. As always, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it more than you will ever know, and keep hacking away at that backlog.